we'll just start off with some of the more traditional values with the use of Pearsall products, which essentially form the basis of thread so far as the original flies were concerned. Now, Pearsall's is a silk, and nothing wrong with it whatsoever, but it has one slight disadvantage, and that is that it rots. And the standard practice for preparation with Pearsall's thread years ago, and still is today to be honest about it, it would be this. You need some pure beeswax, just like this. You know, some of the so-called beeswax or waxes out there today I don't really care for, to be honest about it. Pure beeswax is soft. And what you essentially do is this, and as a matter of interest, I've just wrapped some Pearsall's thread on my regular bobbin here, is that you take your thread and you very, very quickly just draw it through the wax. And essentially what takes place is that the heat and friction caused burns that wax into your thread. And it does a couple of things over and above the fact that it enables the thread to last a little longer, because it stops it rotting. You see how different it is. It's much stiffer now to work with. To all intents and purposes, if you take a simple body formation of thread, well, all you're going to do is this. You're going to start here, and you're going to wrap the thread body down. And you know, some famous flies like Greenwood's Glory, for example, and Partridge and Orange incorporate just pure thread bodies. Snipe and Purple also being another one. And you work that way all the way back down to wherever. You know, typically some flies, there were certain, shall we say, start and stop points. You know, there's people that argue, okay, you know, the body shouldn't extend past the point of the hook. In other cases, well, yeah, it should come between a position between the point and the barb, and or it should finish at a position approximately where the barb starts. There's no question of doubt in my mind whatsoever that has some value depending on the fly you're tying, but right now we're just, you know, concentrating on techniques for bodies. So what we then do is, of course, we reverse that back up, and essentially we've established a body formed of Pearsall's thread. If we were going to tie a hackler or a tail in, well, of course we tie the tail in when we got to the back end there. We'd come forward and we would tie the hackle in. Although you'll learn a little bit more about hackle techniques when we move to that at a later stage, because in some cases we actually would tie the hackle stem in before we wound the body. In other cases we don't do that. We tie the hackle in after we form the body. So essentially the process of producing a traditional style Pearsall's thread body is the thread run through beeswax. That does a number of different things, as I explained to you. It protects your thread, it stops it rotting away, and it also, to some extent, depending on the thread you use, changes the color. Traditionally the Greenwood's Glory is an olivey shade fly, but it's wax thread, and that kind of gives it that hue, as they explain it. Now watch very carefully what I'm going to do here, because there's a kind of a trick to this, and I watch people doing it and they do it the wrong way and they wonder why it don't work too good. You're going to separate strands of this. Now most people would attempt to split this by pulling it apart like that, and sometimes you'll get away with it, but you know the simple way is this. You just hold one end and you literally pull it out and you split the thread. Really simple. And you can reduce it down again. So you want a thin body, same again. Don't pull the two strands apart, just grab one section, draw it out. So essentially what you're doing is you're reducing the numbers of strands, which in the case of Marabou Floss amount to 8, into 2, 4 or 6, depending on how many of those strands you extrude, leaving you with what you want to produce the body of the fly. Okay, so we got two choices here so far as the floss body is concerned, and I'll show you both. The first one is we attach the floss to the shank of the hook, and we just draw that in so we've got no excess, and we wrap both thread in a rearward direction and also the floss to the tail end of the fly, or at least to the point where we no longer wish the body to go further. Reverse the thread back up to the point, leaving us sufficient room to tie a hackle, because there's almost always going to be a hackle tied in there. And we're going to use exactly the same technique that I demonstrate to you when you rib the fly. You're going to balance the bobbin on this finger, and you're going to start to make close but touching turns of the floss body coming forward to the thread, And then same process, underneath, over and up, and you've got the floss body locked in. Okay? The other option is this. We start the thread down the shank of the hook, close to even touching turns. If you use the tag of thread and hold it uppermost, each turn successfully drops down close butted to the one prior. When you get close to the end, cut off the excess. And you can use the same technique as I showed you earlier on with the ribbing technique. You can hold your floss underneath, put it against the thread, bring it back over the top, draw it back in. That's probably the quickest and the simplest way to do it. And or you can hold the thread, hold the floss to the right of the thread. Just take a slack wrap, get it caught, fetch it back in. Ideally what I try to do is keep the tag of floss the same length as the body, for the simple reason when I wind the thread back up it creates that evenness. If you cut it short you create kind of a little lump at that point in time. Okay, we reverse the thread back up. You know, I kind of try to keep wherever I start to trap the floss material, if it's on top I keep it there, if it's to the side I keep it there, but it's really a thread tension deal more than anything else. As long as you maintain fairly reasonable tension on your thread, you should be able to pretty much maintain it whichever position that you started it to be trapped when you started at the tail end of the fly. If you use too much tension it will start to turn around the thread base and the hook shank at the same time. And same thing, bobbin's balanced. Make sure that these two strands stay evenly together and then start to build up body. Typically what you want to do is go a little touch left side of the previous wind and then again just work up to the thread, underneath, over, back, over the top, 2 wraps, you should have that secured. Tinsel bodies. The absolute most important thing, period, when you're producing tinsel bodied flies is to have a flat underbody to wind that tinsel over. If you create an underbody with your thread which is fat and ugly and distorted, you will not be able to wind a perfect tinsel body over the top of it. Furthermore, you lose a significant amount of security of that body if it's not founded on a good foundation in the first place. Now there are again 2 ways to do this. Years and years ago when I first tied traditional flies, I had to use metallic tinsels. In other words, they're basically metal and they weren't that easy to work with. If you caught the thread in the wrong way on them, it would literally cut them like a razor blade, but worse, they tarnished. And of course you would end up with a box of dull, tarnished looking flies because they were metallic. Today that's not the case. We have got tinsels which are man-made synthetics in simple terms, and they don't do that. They don't tarnish. They're also a lot easier to work with. Again, depending on the size of fly that you're tying, be it, you know, a size 8, 6, whatever, 14, you could determine by the numbers of strands of the finer grades of tinsel how many you need to produce that body. Now there are some tinsels out there that are essentially gold one side and silver the other. Personally I don't like those, at least for trout flies of this size, to be honest about it. I prefer tinsel that's equal the same, gold both sides, silver both sides, or whatever. And you've got lots of variables, you know, also other than what I would define as more metallic looking tinsel. You've got these kind of materials too, flashaboos and various other things that give you mediums that you can produce bodies with which historically you could not do that with. So anyway, let's just go through the process of showing you essentially the 2 ways to produce a tinsel body. Almost always with a tinsel body too, you would incorporate a ribbing medium, and just for the sake of demonstrating that to you, we will probably do that. Okay, first and foremost, what we're going to do is this. We're going to start with a thread base, and we're going to take that thread base flat and perfectly even. Let's move those out of the way there a second, to the tail end of the fly, just before the bend, and cut off the excess thread. Okay, just for example, we're going to produce a gold bodied fly. Oh, this stuff's probably a little less than a millimeter in width. And we'll take 2 strands of that. Remember the little secrets here. Keep a long length of material. You'll find it an awful lot easier to trap it. And then draw it back like that. Bear in mind also we want to incorporate the tinsel as part of the underbody. Because what that does, and I've explained that to you many times, it keeps you a much greater evenness and proportionate value to the body of your fly. Bringing the thread up. Another trick to this too is if you want to get real good flat proportioned bodies to a fly, don't yank the thread too tight. And furthermore, one other point I should make to you is that I like thread that enables me to flatten it by one way and tighten it up the other. And this thread here, which is obviously UTC thread 70, is absolutely perfect for that. Danvers too is another one of my favorite threads. Okay, bear in mind also that after a body medium is wound, a hackle and sometimes a wing has to be built to the front of the fly. So always remember that and never come too close to the eye. You're actually better off to be too short than you are too far, because if you don't have enough room to tie the other components in, well, you may as well start again. Alrighty. Okay, we're going to pick these 2 strands of tinsel up and keep a relative degree of tension equal all the time that you proceed up the shank of that hook. And what I'm looking for is to get perfect evenness and no gaps in between it. In other words, what I want is a perfect coverage of tinsel to the body of the fly. And once you get the knack of it, now what is important too is watch how I'm winding. I'm kind of winding square to the shank of the hook. It's not at an extreme angle like this, albeit I'm gradually moving up. So each turn pretty much is about 1 halfways over the previous. And by doing that, it enables me to get that neatness in the body. Bring the thread back round over the top, 1, 2, and that's how we've produced a perfect flat even tinsel body to the fly. Okay, this time we're going to catch the thread at the front end. Make sure with about 1, 2, 3, 4 wraps you've got it secure. In other words, it can't loosen itself. Okay, what we're then going to do is we're going to hold the tinsel like this to the side of the hook, bring the thread across the top, trap the tinsel and bring it so it's underside of the shank of the hook. Okay, and we're going to reverse the thread back down again, trapping it in along its length till we reach the tail end. And we're going to reverse it back up again, making sure that we keep a flat, even underbody. It's so important that you do that till you reach that point. Okay, that can stay there and we can cut off the excess. And by the same method that we previously wound the gold body on the fly before, we do exactly the same thing. And this is what is defined as the holographic style tinsel too, so you get kind of a little difference as far as the visual effects of it. Again, over the thread, underneath, back up, 1, 2, we've got it secured, cut off the excess, and we're ready to go for the next procedure of this particular fly. This is another kind of slight variation where, for example, you're going to incorporate a ribbon medium in the fly, but you're actually going to start the tinsel at the head end of the fly. There's advantages to and for against that, just depending on the fly that you're going to tie, but pretty much what you go to look at is this. If you start at the tail end, you're actually putting one single wrap of tinsel body. If you start at the head end, by the method I'm now going to show you, you're actually going to put 2, because you're going to wrap it down and you're going to wrap it back up again. But in order to effect that, we're going to start here with a thread, and we're going to incorporate a ribbon medium. And remember what we did when we learned the techniques for ribbon. We can either tie them in at the tail end, or we can start up at the upper part of the fly. So which would be the best option if we're tying in a tinsel body and we want absolute perfect neatness? Well, it's going to be this. We're going to wrap the thread to the tail end of the fly. If we are going to incorporate a tail of the fly, well, we do that right now. But we're going to incorporate a ribbing medium. We set that in under the shank of the hook. If you take a look at the relative distance of tinsel that's exposed, is that within the margin of where we're going to cover it up when we come forward with the thread? Not quite, so we're just going to pull that back right to there, and we know that's good. And then we're going to reverse the thread, trying to keep that ribbing medium somewhere underneath or close to it, the shank of the hook, till we get to a position not too close to the eye. Okay, so everything's nice and neat and tidy right there. We're going to pick up our tinsel. There we go. Okay, and actually, remember the technique I showed you earlier? You can actually do it this way here too. You don't have to, that's not necessarily a technique that relates to the tail end of the fly. So in actual fact, what you're doing is securing the tinsel with underneath one wrap of thread. But see this? You don't have to worry about trying to hold it and wrap the thread around it. It's a lot easier to do it, to be honest about it. And then we bring the thread forward about another 3 turns to add that final level of security. Now we're going to wind the body. And we're going to go down at a relative angle, making sure that this is balanced on your finger. It's so easy to do this once you get used to it. You have far more control over the material that you're winding. You can maintain much more consistency so far as tension is concerned, and you leave yourself a significant margin to work with, as opposed to trying to work in between here and there. Okay. Right, we're up to the thread, underneath, back over, 1, 2, 3. Now let me explain you something. I'm confident to do this with 2 or 3 turns, and I'm not suggesting that you might be able to do the same thing. So what I'm going to suggest to you is this. Remember how many turns of thread you make? 2 or 3. If you want to add some security turns, 4, 5, 6, that's fine. But you're not going to maintain those 6 turns, because what you're going to do is this. Now remember we discussed earlier when we did ribbing tinsels, which way do you wind them? In the same direction as you wound the body, or in the opposing direction? Well, as far as tinsel body is concerned, I don't think it makes any difference. With Herl bodies or dub bodies, there may be some argument which way you would choose to do it. But typically I'm going to wind it in the same direction. So we're going to pick this up and we're going to come forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, remember what we did. We wound excessive wraps of thread there, didn't we? Just for security. But what we're going to do, we're going to back them off. Back to 2. We're going to come underneath, back round, 3, 4, 5. So what we did to secure the tinsel and that ribbon medium is make 5 wraps of thread. Albeit we made 5 or 6 to add security while we wound the ribbon medium. What we done, we backed them off, because all the time you've got tension on the rib and it's over the top of the tinsel underbody, it can undo itself because you're holding it under tension. Okay, that's good. That gives us a perfect medium for hackle and wing on that fly. Herl bodies. Other than Peacock, which is fairly commonly used today anyway, by and large you tend not to see the use of Herl. By definition, Herl is feather fiber, like this. And I can tell you that you can produce some unbelievable bodies with Herl, particularly for soft hackles. It's a very light material and it's got a fair degree of natural buoyancy to it as well. And it's long in fiber, and you can dye it easily to many subtle shades and colours, you know, subtle shades of olives and duns and various others, and whether the turkey tails of natural coloration or otherwise. The one advantage of Herl, feather Herl, is that it has a natural taper to it. In other words, if you take 3 or 4 strands, it's extremely thin at the fine ends, and it's fairly thick at the butt ends. And that is absolutely ideal, because what it does, it creates a natural taper definition in the body of the fly. However, what you've got to figure out is at what point do I tie it in? In other words, if we tie it in right here at the very, at the very extreme fine ends, then we're going to get a very slim profile body. But if we come back somewhere like about there and tie it in, well, we're building up a little bit more bulk in that body of the fly. So That's just one element of using herl that you need to take in consideration when you're tying that particular fly. Almost always too, these flies may incorporate a ribbing technique, and of course that would be incorporated in two different ways. We can actually start the ribbing at this point here at the same time as we tie in the herl, because what we're going to do is reverse the thread back down anyway and trap in both the herl and the ribbing medium at the same time, because we're going to bring the thread back up anyway, which enables us to wind the body. So to all intents and purposes, I'll do it that way, so it's fairly easy for you to follow that. Because there's no need actually to wind the thread to the tail end of the fly and then have to tie this in as a separate identity. You can do it at the same time, because you're going to cover it over when you bring the herl back up. So okay, we've made one wrap of thread there to catch the herl in. Let's catch that tinsel in underneath like that, and we're going to reverse the thread back down the body, maintaining tension equally for both materials until we get to the tail end. I always kind of look for the easiest, most efficient way to produce a fly, and for the best part of it, that means pretty much this: utilizing minimum amount of thread turns to do what's necessary to be done. Okay, we've cut off the excess. Right, so just by that simple process, we've got two elements of material tied in. You didn't have to go down and tie one in, then go back again and tie the other one. Now we're going to wind the body. Again, by the same process, keep the bobbin balanced. Now, watch as we wind this herl body. See the distinctive separation of segmentation that herl creates to the body of the fly. And then we're going to come back underneath, and we're going to secure it underneath. And again, for your own personal benefit, make some security turns. I usually use 2 and I'm happy, but just make 3, 4 or 5. It doesn't matter. Just remember how many you made, because you can back the thread off afterwards. And remember also, when I showed you some of the techniques of tailing, if you twist the fiber like this, put the scissor behind it, you can cut it off as tight as you can get it. You can't get it any tighter than that. Now, so far as the ribbon medium is concerned, it amounts to this. If we wind the ribbon medium in the same direction as we wound the body, you will still see it, but it's kind of a little bit different as far as its visibility is concerned. If, however, we wind it in the opposing direction, I have to back this off here, and we cut one at the tail end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we come back underneath to secure it. Notice the significant difference of how visible that ribbon medium is over that material, because you've cross-wound it against the relative angle that you wound the material in the first place. So that's just something you need to bear in mind. Some people will argue that if you wind it in the same direction as you wound the body, there's less strength. If a fish catches it, tears up. Okay, that may be a case, but you know, I don't really worry about that. My objective is to catch the fish in the first place. We're going to incorporate a rib to the fly. We don't need to tie them in as 2 separate identities. We do exactly the same thing at the same time, because you're going to make no difference. You're going to cover it over anyways. Okay, take your herl and your ribbon tinsel. Hold the 2 together, hold them in underneath the shank of the hook. Pull those back. Okay, bring the thread forward. Make sure they're trapped evenly along the side of the shank of the hook. If you have any excess that you need to cut off, well, that's fine. Do it before you get to the tail end. Now, I'm not kind of going to complicate the situation here, but just to explain this to you as a matter of interest, you could go 2 ways here. You can wind that body and rib it in the same direction or the opposing direction as I did on the previous fly, or you can incorporate by twisting the ribbon medium and the body of the fly together at the same time, like this, and then we can proceed to wind the 2 mediums up the body at the same time. And if you watch real carefully, as I move up the body, I'm still twisting the herl. You see that? For each turn I make, I twist the herl. Each turn I make, I twist the herl, till we reach the thread base, where we add the security. Now if you look closely at this, you can see how I've intermixed the ribbon medium with the body of the fly. Alright, Peacock Herl. If you find that you buy yourself a package of Peacock Herl and it's busting and splitting on you all the time, the probability is it's very old. And I would pretty much, if I had that, I would dump it. You know, Peacock Herl should be kind of bright and resilient, and you know, it should have a fair amount of strength to it. If it just breaks on you like that, well, get rid of it. Another little trick to the trade is this. I may only want to incorporate, for example, 4 strands of Peacock Herl for the body of the fly. But from a safety perspective, I'm going to tie in 6. Because if one breaks on me, I still got 2 more spares to recover the loss of the fact I've lost that one. Because it's easy material to break out in the first place. Alright, we got the Herl pretty much, excuse me, the thread pretty much centerwise. Now, there's 2 ways to tie Peacock Herl in, the right and the wrong way. The right way is to tie it in by the tips, not those thick buds. And I'll explain to you why in a moment. Okay, cut those square. That's the first thing. And set them in so that pretty much your cut section comes to the point where when you bring your thread forward, they're going to be covered over and you're not going to build up unnecessary bulk at the eye. And reverse the thread down, just trapping down those Peacock Herl fibers as you go. And then reverse the thread back up. And as you see, we trap those down also as we go. But what we did is actually to build up a fairly even underbody of the fly thereafter that we're going to wind the Herl over. Okay, now, always remember this. It is common for, shall we say, books to tell you that, or whatever, oh, Peacock Herl, twist it together, form a bunch. Don't do that. If you do that, you destroy the effect of buzz that you get in Peacock Herl. What you should do is wind it in a square angle, like this. Now, let me explain another thing to you too, is that if you tie it in by the tips, as you wind that forward, you're actually pulling those little minute barbs out at right angles to the stem. If you tie that in by the butt ends, as you're winding it and you're pulling it through your fingers, you're compressing those little barbs to the stem. Okay, same thing, balance the bobbin on the finger. And we're not taking tremendous tension here, but what we're doing, we're just working up the body of the fly, nice and even. As you come up the body of the fly, you can visually see the buzz effect of this Herl. We get real close on that shot. You see, it's really flyaway fairy, what I call a flyaway fair effect. If you twisted that Herl together, there's no way you're going to get that effect. It's going to be a tight, bunched up ball. Fine, that's okay for stonefly nymphs and stuff like that, I guess, but you know, that's not what I'm looking for the effects of a good wet fly soft hackle body. You know. Same thing applies, you know, if you want to go in the same direction as that you wound the body, that's fine. If you want to go back through the opposite direction, likewise, that's fine. The difference is the visual effect that you will see. Tie in at least 2 more strands than you need, and if you happen to break one along the way, you've got another 1 or 2 to back you up. So there you go. That's really what you're looking for a good Peacock Herl bodied fly. That real nice buzz effect. But, you know, when you buy a pheasant tail, try to get one that's got the longest possible Herl from the stem that you can get. It'll make your life a lot easier when you wind it. This is an exceptionally long one. It's probably nearly 3 inches. I mean, typically some of them are pretty short, you know, maybe just over an inch, and they're kind of tough to work with. You know, if you want to make the body in one complete go, you're probably going to have to tie it off and tie another piece in. So, you know, at least, you know, look for Herl that's long in length. The other thing too, typically with a pheasant tail, is you incorporate the fine ends of the pheasant tail in the tail medium of the fly. So bear that one in mind also. You know, depending on the size of the hook you're tying, you're going to have anything from maybe 1/8, quarter of an inch, maybe a little bit more extending past the bend of the hook. So you need a fair amount of material to continue to produce a wrap body of Herl up the shank of the hook. Alrighty, let's wrap the thread on. Work our way back to the position where we're going to tie the thread down to secure the tail of the fly. Pretty much just before about the bend of the hook. Okay, around about there. Alright, now, if you recall when we learned techniques of tailing, objectively what we aimed to do was to keep the fiber in a straight alignment at the end, and that's very much also the case here with this pheasant tail. Put it out at right angles to the stem, cut it off, and look, all those fine ends are in alignment. Okay, let's just take that over and assess what length we need. Okay, we're pretty much good about there. One wrap of thread, make sure we've got that secured over the top. That's good. 2, 3, add security. Bring a thread in front. Typically also this fly is going to incorporate a ribbon medium of copper wire. You can use gold or silver, it's really entirely up to you. Take a long length of wire, push it through, trap it, pull it back, and then once you've got that, then continue forward with your thread wraps. Oh, we jumped a thread there, to the point where we can wind the body of the fly. By the same token as any other technique of winding that I've demonstrated to you, balance the bobbin on the little finger, take the herl, and start to proceed to wind the body. And try to get some definition to it, you know, try to bulk it up. As you come up closer to the head of the fly, just increase the back up over of the previous to do that. So we're going to take 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, we're going to back some of this off, but what that does, that gives you that security margin. Twist it, cut it off. Ribbon medium, you can go either way. You can go with or counterclockwise. It's entirely up to you. Doesn't make a lot of difference, I don't think, at the end of it, other than the fact that the ribbon medium is more visible wound in the opposing direction to the body being wound. And we're going to come up to the thread. Now we're going to reduce the thread bulk, back that up, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's okay. Come underneath, back over the top, 1, 2, 3. And we've got everything ready and secure to produce a hackle.